from yesterday's summit and first time joining today, so really great to see some new faces. We are delighted to be hosting today with the National Retrofit Hub. We believe that this relationship is so important in supporting us decarbonise the built environment. Over the past few years, the BEST team have had a dedicated retrofit team working with many of you today, and this year we've worked really closely with Scottish Enterprise, looking at our energy efficiency and market demand. We have expanded our low carbon learning into a dedicated young person's learning upskilling programme. We've also been working really closely with Scottish Building Standards and, as always, local authorities, housing associations, colleges, universities and much more. And many of you are in the room today. We have so many collaborators, and also this afternoon we're going to have such a fantastic event of full workshops. So if you're not involved actively just now, please do that today. We have a fantastic lineup, and we really want you to join our BEST growing community. So please follow us on social media, post your pictures, engage with others online, and please get involved. Scan the QR codes on the screen, and you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and also our website. So hashtag BestFest23. And let's get this conversation going today. My role at BEST is really about listening really to all of you and the needs that the built environment has. And what I try to do is I try and join the dots and then support us and collaborate and really moving forward. I invite you to do the same today, so listen, question, really ask those difficult questions, but then think about how we can join the dots, how we can work together, collaborate. We've got the tools, we're all here, we've got the motivation, we just need that inventive thinking. I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thanks so much, Katrina, and thank you so much to BEST for inviting the National Retrofit Hub to co-chair this conference today. So yeah, I'm Rachel Owens. I'm one of the co-directors of the National Retrofit Hub, along with the wonderful Sarah Edmonds, who's in the front row here. The National Retrofit Hub was launched this year really to bring together everyone who's working towards retrofit, to share their knowledge, to collaborate, to work through solutions to some of the trickiest barriers we face in the industry. We have working groups that are looking at topics from workforce growth and skills, to standards and design guidance, to the techniques and the technologies we need to use, to finance, delivery approaches, but also how do we drive uptake and get people to really want and engage with retrofit. So it's a completely open organisation. We rely on people like yourselves joining our groups and sharing your knowledge, so please have a look at our website. If there are any working groups where you think, actually, yeah, I've got some knowledge I can share with that, please do get in touch and join us there. So I'm going to start with just 2 slides, a little bit of a framing, maybe a bit of a provocation for you to think about as you hear the rest of our wonderful talks today. The visuals in the background are actually made by students that we tutored at the London School of Architecture. We did a design think tank called Resilient Neighbourhoods Community Power. So I wanted to start by saying that I think I'm standing in front of a room full of people who don't really need to be convinced on why we need to urgently retrofit the nation's homes. You're all here today, you all know why we need to do this, from the climatic issues to the health and well-being issues. We've also developed a great body of knowledge on what we need to do, what measures and what processes. We need to better distribute this knowledge, but it's there. So instead of focusing on the why and the what, I'm going to talk about 2 fundamentally important questions: the who and the how. So in the UK, the gap between the rich and the poor is growing, and globally, inequality is flatlined. It's not getting better, but it desperately needs to. Current systems extract wealth from our citizens and communities and concentrate it in the hands of the few. The built environment industry is one such system. So, when making a retrofit sector, let's ask ourselves, who's involved? Who gets a say? Who benefits? Who profits? And where does extraction and exploitation happen? Kay Rayworth in Donor Economics calls for economies to be created that are distributed by design, sharing value and opportunity equitably. We have the chance to build a sector that is not divisive and extractive, but is instead distributive by design. We can share our knowledge, create open systems, put communities at the heart of decision making. So think today, when you listen to everything and you participate in these workshops, does this way of working generate and protect value for the people the project is intended to serve? How can I share my skills and knowledge, collaborating with others to create networks that self-reinforce? And how do these proposals enable power to be centred back in the hands of citizens? So following on from that, we've got a Slido poll to start off the day. If you would like to scan this QR code, you can also follow the website link here, and that will take you to a question. The question is, what do you think the most important role retrofit can play in the just transition to net zero is? We're going to give you 5 options. You'll probably all want to say all of these, but we're not letting you do that. So you've got to make up your minds. Is it about tackling fuel poverty, creating healthier homes, strengthening sustainable material supply chains, something else, creating high quality skilled jobs and economic growth, or is it about, I'm not sure whether there's a final one, which is about community empowerment and community wealth.
Selfie, which I forgot to do. While we are all doing that, we'll do our selfie. Thank you.
So it looks like you're all thinking tackling fuel poverty and creating healthier homes are 2 of the key things that we need to focus on. So that's really interesting to see, so thanks very much. And that will help sort of frame the rest of the day. So now, let's move on to our opening keynote. We want to go back to the slide deck. So we're joined now by Smith Mordak. As UKGBC Chief Executive, Smith is leading the organisation through a really critical period for the UK to get back on track to net zero. Smith has also held a wide range of industry positions in which they have campaigned for a just transition to a more sustainable future, including as an editorial board member for the C40 Journal for City Climate Policy and Economy, and as a nationally elected councillor at the RIBA. Combining their deep science-based understanding of the climate emergency with a principled approach to transforming our built environment, Smith is a committed and passionate advocate for building a future economy where people, society and ecology can flourish. So please join us both in welcoming Smith to the stage.
Hello, I am here. Great. So thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Smith Mordak, and it's nice to be one of the people that gets to use the pronouns they, them, and that's being acknowledged. So thank you, Best, for having pronouns. So I'm from the UK Green Building Council. We're a membership organisation. We have over 700 members from across the built environment industry, and we're doing lots of important work to campaign for a wider kind of just transition across the built environment. But obviously I'm here to talk about retrofit today. But before I talk about buildings, I want to talk about something else, and you're just going to have to bear with me for a minute, because I'm going to space. This will make sense in a minute. So 30 years ago, a group of scientists led by Carl Sagan attempted to find evidence of life on Earth from space. Now, obviously they were using sort of all kinds of different equipment. We're still using all kinds of different equipment to try and find evidence of life on other planets. And so obviously it's very important to think about, like, well, actually, if you use the same equipment, the same kind of processes to detect life on Earth, would you find any? Because, if we wouldn't, then maybe that suggests something about the way we're going about finding life elsewhere. This is my next slide now. So Galileo launched in October 1989, and it was going on a 6-year flight to Jupiter. And in order to get to Jupiter, it had to go around the world a few times in
order to pick up speed. So while it was doing that, the group of scientists, led by Carl Sagan, used the equipment on board to kind of do that kind of flyby approach to try and work out whether or not they could find life on Earth. So what did they find? Well, they found gaseous water in the atmosphere, ice and at the poles, and large expanses of water, seas and oceans. Found temperature ranging from -30 to +18, an ozone layer. So all of these things, not proof of life, but enablers, potential enablers, knowing what we do know about life. They also found high concentrations of oxygen and methane, and those are important because those are very reactive gases, so unless there's some other process, for example, life kind of replenishing those would tend to dissipate. So again, not proof of life, but maybe suggestive. And they also found that there was a lot of absorption of red light, which could indicate, for example, something like photosynthesis. But again, not proof of life, just things, because we know about things about life, we know that they're connected. But if we didn't understand, how life worked on this planet, that wouldn't be proof of life. Then things got interesting when they discovered narrow band radio waves. So you get radio waves generally, but if they're in these kind of narrow little bands, as they are sort of obviously with radio technology, then that maybe suggests evidence of a technological civilization. So essentially, what the team found, what Galileo found, was not evidence of life on Earth, but evidence of technology on Earth. So if they'd done this, a couple of hundred years ago, they wouldn't find anything. And I think this is really fascinating because if we've not sort of definitively detected life on Earth, and we still have, and there's sort of other stuff going on now, we've got the James Webb Space Telescope and so on, sort of doing different kinds of things. But technology was able to detect technology, but technology wasn't able to detect life as we know it. And there are other systems, other experiments that have happened as well, like using the same technology that we've used to sort of discover life on Mars in kind of deserts in Chile, where we know there is life, and they still haven't detected anything. So what this tells me is that the tools that we use and the ways of thinking that we use to look at a problem define the way that we see that problem. And this is part of, I think, the issue that we have in terms of the how and the what of retrofit. So thank you for the setup. Obviously, as Rachel said, we all know that we desperately need to sort out the retrofit issue. But what tools are we using? What technologies are we using? What ways in are we using to actually do that? We all know what the problems are. I made this graphic by myself. We know the basic problems, there's lots and lots of emissions, we've got lots of leaky homes, drafty, cold home, we don't have enough renewable energy, there aren't sort of enough skilled individuals, that knowledge isn't distributed, as you say, we don't have enough low carbon materials. We know what those basic problems are. And we know what the core challenges are, but it's things like, where will the materials come from? Or who is going to be able to organise and design and deliver all of this work? Which buildings should be prioritised? How will the benefits be distributed fairly? How will health risks be mitigated? All of these kind of core challenges. And yet what we often hear about more are these kinds of proxy challenges, if you like. So how can we generate demand? What does that even mean? How can we scale up supply? How can we nudge behaviour change? Why don't businesses invest in training? Why don't we recognise the economic co-benefits? How can we incentivise investment? These things that we sort of assume are going to deal with the other pieces, but actually they're kind of like the Galileo trying to detect life with a very kind of limited set of tools. And so I suppose my point, what I wanted to say is as we go forward through the day, how can we make sure that we're looking at the life stuff and really tackling the life stuff? Because this is what we know. Within the built environment, we know about the life stuff, right? We know about organising materials, we know about how we make decisions together and so on. I'll say more about that in a minute, but the technology stuff, the kind of the economic drivers, the sort of political stuff, those things are of course very, very important, but they're not automatically going to lead to this. And part of our role in the built environment is talking about this stuff and working with others in order to figure out how we can use these technologies in order to do this. Otherwise, we're just stuck like the Galileo and we can't figure out life on Earth. So I just want to talk about the life stuff for a minute with one of my favourite heroes, I'm sorry for anyone who's heard me speak in the last 2 years, because I would have probably brought up Ellen Ostrom. She won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2009 for the way that she studied the economic governance of common resources. And that's what we have. We have a load of common resources in terms of homes and land and materials and so on. And it's how do we govern those in a way that is distributed by design, that is kind of, just. And so these are she has these principles that were the basis for the Nobel Prize, and I can't overstate how sort of important and brilliant they are in order that we're really discussing the life stuff. So, the first one, shared purpose. So this is about really understanding that our shared purpose is that everybody has access to safe, healthy housing within our renewable budget. Renewable energy budget. Like, if we don't have that, it doesn't matter, like, if everybody has a job and nobody has a house. Like, jobs are important, jobs are an important sort of driver, but they're part of the technology. If nobody has a house to live in, if nobody has some safe and secure housing, then the goal is not being met. So we need to think not only about the kind of the proxies, but really the things that we're actually trying to achieve. Equitable distribution. I mean, we'll hear about this millions of times, but it's like that everybody has access to this safe and healthy housing. And if the technologies, and I'm using technology obviously in a very broad way to include things like the economy, if those things aren't achieving this goal, then we need to redesign stuff. Fair and inclusive decision making. So how do we decide together how we prioritize different buildings, different resources? Where does the lithium need to go? Where does the copper need to go? How do we collectively make decisions about scarce resources? I don't know that we really have a lot of the mechanisms. So in order to make those decisions, we rely a lot on sort of pricing and the markets and supply and demand in order to kind of make those decisions. If that's not working that well, that's sort of what I would say, a bit of an understatement, then we need to find other ways of making decisions together, and events like this are part of that. So that's brilliant. Monitoring agreed behaviours. So like, what does success look like? And how can we measure that in an accessible way that's accurate enough? And I think this is important because we hear a lot about data. We need more data. And yes, we need good data, but also we don't need to know to 17,000 decimal places exactly like how everything is performing, exactly what's happening. We need enough information that we can make good decisions. So I think we need to think carefully about, I'm sure we've been lots of conversations about like what information we need and how we share that and how we make sure that that's accessible. But like, what data do we need? What exactly is it we need to measure? And again, how do we measure the actual life stuff? How do we measure the health outcomes, the equity and so on, as well as this sort of the proxy measurements that we might be using in terms of things like valuation in order to indicate those things. But knowing when we're measuring a core thing and when we're measuring a proxy, a bit of the technology. Graduated response to behaviour is another one. It's like, we don't want to have disproportionate rewards or punishments for anybody. So what do we do when things don't go according to plan, and how do we make sure that we build in like careful and kind and sort of gradated responses to when things don't go according to plan? And related to that is fast and fair conflict resolution. What do we do when we aren't all able to show up as we want to? We're all human. All of this stuff is human. We're going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. We're going to collectively make mistakes. So how do we make sure that when things don't go according to plan, that we can quickly resolve those conflicts? Nearly there. Don't know how, am I doing okay? Right to organise. So I think this is really about how do we maintain the freedom to choose how to organise ourselves differently. So like, obviously we want to entrench just behaviour, we want to entrench equity. We also don't want to entrench anything so much that it's impossible to reorganise ourselves. Things are fluid, things change. We need to be adaptable to a shifting climate and also to just a shifting societal structures and so on. So maintaining that way, that right to organise is really, really important. And then Eleanor's final point is about polycentric governance. And I like ending on this one because it's got that real kind of built environment. You know, you can imagine it sort of working in urban planning and sexy plans. But in the case of the Retrofit challenge, it's about how do we divide up into specialist groups that facilitate and deliver specialist things, and how do those different groups like do their work as part of the puzzle? And do we maintain that recognition for the authority of these different groups in a way that is sort of allows us to be flexible and adaptable and all work according to our strengths? So I think we can learn tons from Eleanor. I think any situation, any talk I'm ever asked to give, I can use the Eleanor talk. I don't use it every time because it's boring, but I think it's really, really brilliant stuff. And then that will enable us not to just get waylaid by the technology, but also think about the stuff of life. And that's what I'd love to do today. That's what I've got. Thank you.
Really, really fantastic. And when you take a seat over here, and when you said to me earlier you were going to talk about space, I was thinking, okay, what's going to come next? We're going to take a few questions for Smith. So, but while you have a think about that, Smith, I don't know where to start with my questions, but I have a few.
Don't ask me technical questions about Galileo.
I have a few questions. When you put up the slide about life and all those questions, and we're really, at best, we come across those questions all the time, and everybody in the room has those questions. How do we start to approach some answers to those questions? What are your thoughts around them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't have the slides in front of me anymore, but things like materials, I think that we need to have like a deeper understanding of what we really know about. We really know about materials. We really know about energy use. This is the stuff that we know. I think sometimes as an industry we kind of skip ahead to the kind of the larger things. It's like, well, we'll just incentivize this with a green mortgage or something like that. And it's like, obviously those kinds of conversations are really important. But I think there's still more to do in terms of like, how do we organize our land overall? How do we think about like, well, what is the total amount of insulation that we need to create, grow, and so how can we kind of, at a kind of sector level, make rational decisions about how we're going to use our resources, and then we can collectively sort of communicate that to the wider economy.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Do we have any questions in the room just now? Yeah, Mike's just...
Hi, I'm Cara Jenkinson from Ashton and the National Retrofit Hub. I was just wondering, within the current setup of the construction industry and thinking about things like the Farmer Review and high levels of subcontracting and not always decent wage rates, given all of those aspirations for distribution and fairness, is the current construction industry set up to deliver the training we need, to deliver the good jobs we need as part of the retrofit process?
So I think yes and no. Like, yes, we have the supply chains and the way that our industry is structured at the moment, and the kinds of contracts that we use and the kind of procurement processes that we use are structured in a very specific way for a specific way of working that does need to shift. I think we are seeing that. I think the way in which developers and contractors are working differently together, the way we're sort of busting silos in different ways, the way that sort of architects and engineers even are working together. I think there's a lot of, there has been, I think my entire career really, like a lot of awareness that actually these silos and these structures aren't really serving us, and so we need to find ways of radically collaborating. And obviously I'm going to say that the UKGBC is an organisation that is bridging across those different elements of the supply chain, of the ecosystem that is the built environment, in order to sort of devise different ways of working. And then that allows us that kind of system change. So it's not just about what everybody does or every organisation does within their kind of existing mandate purview, but actually how we work differently together. And we've just launched a whole piece of systems change work that's looking at exactly that.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yeah, at the front here.
Land use, and I'm just wondering if the built environment is a silo in itself, and we should be speaking more to the agricultural sector to talk about crops for food and crops for building materials. So how do we break through and get talking to the agricultural sector?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the kind of the polycentric governance piece, it's sort of fractal. I think that applies within our sector, but then also the way that we need to collaborate with other sectors, the way that different government departments need to collaborate differently, because of course, yeah, as you've mentioned, sort of land use then has an impact on agriculture, and how do we feed ourselves, and how do we have food security given, climate change, we're talking about flooding, like things are shifting, so we need to work differently. And then when we're looking at retrofit, how do we make sure that health outcomes and therefore the strategies around health and the NHS and so on, like those things are embedded differently as well. So yeah, we need to reach out. And actually one of the biggest I was reading a study about like the key things that you can do in order to help to create change, and connecting with groups outside of your group is one of the most important things. So maybe something that Bess could do next year is like you can have somebody from the NHS and somebody from like a big kind of farmers. Yeah.
And I really loved your slide, the fast and fair conflict resolution, because that's I think that's so important. What we need to do, we need to make these decisions, have the conflict, but quickly move on. Yeah. Do we have any kind of final questions? We have one at the back. And then one in the middle.
Hello, Rufus Grantham from Living Places. How do you think about retrofit, again, not in isolation, but as a component of kind of placemaking, generation, that sort of broader investment?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a conversation this afternoon about kind of place-based decarbonisation efforts, and it's, I think there's a huge power in that kind of neighbourhood scale community change, and I think some of the other speakers this morning will speak to that as well, that I think is quite untapped in terms of like how can we make decisions as a community, as a street, as a neighbourhood, that is both about retrofit, about community energy schemes, that are like really amazing things that really make sense to deliver that kind of work at that kind of scale. And then like when we're thinking about climate adaptation as well, like those kinds of social infrastructure that we need to build at the community scale as well, so that we can adapt, not just like in our own little fortresses, but actually how can we help each other more, how can we build those mutual aid networks. So yeah, I think the kind of the attitude that is really imbued within those Ellen Ostrom principles around like, how do we work together to manage our collective resources works across all different kinds of things, and that retrofit shouldn't be like one unusual thing that we need to deal with in that way. It's more like that way of thinking can be applied to just like how do we live together really.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yeah, just one there. But we'll also have time at the end. Smith will join us in a panel, so more questions there.
It's very echoey, the sound. I want to sing.
If I could sing, I would.
Bust down to some Disney, isn't it?
Hi, Smith. Thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering, do you have any examples of where polycentric governance has worked, or working, as opposed to the existing hierarchical systems that we have?
I'm going to take a lazy example. I think like local authorities are doing a lot of really good work and need to be well resourced so that they can do that. We don't need to have like completely centralized power and like devolved power to local authorities, to cities, to like devolved nations and so on. That is a form of polycentric governance, and if we can have those like local retrofit hubs, we can have like all kinds of like things that can be delivered at local authority scale that then like allows that more direct democracy. That is polycentric governance at work, but we need the resources and the structures to enable that.
Yeah, we have time for a final question.
Hello, Rand Boydell. I'm part of the community retrofit project in the Borders. Retrofit is a time-limited exercise. We have to do this over the next 20, 25 years, and then it disappears as an industry sector. So it's this huge challenge, but it doesn't fit normal business models because it's not a forever thing. And I just wonder if you have given any thought to that context and how you apply some of that thinking to this short time span that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a specific moment where we need to transition from a kind of a model, an industry, an economy that was working in a particular way, and we need to move to the new one. But I think related to the question about, it's not just retrofit, but how do we think, like, these kinds of social and technological infrastructure that we should be putting in place in order to enable the transition will put us in good stead for all the stuff that we have to face. There will be other stuff in the future that we have to face, as well as the climate emergency. Sorry, there's going to be more stuff. And there's that oh, what if we do all of this work to create a just society that is distributive, and turns out climate change is a hoax. We've made all these kind of wonderful shifts to a just society for no reason. It's no, you still get that beautiful just society at the end of it. So I think those infrastructures, putting those infrastructures in place that allow us to live together better and help each other better, are worth it for everything.
And adapt as things adapt.
Yeah,
no, definitely. Thank you so much, Smith. Some real takeaways from myself around beyond the built environment from the conversations that we've been having, but then also how you split it between the kind of life and the technology, and how we think about that. So really, really fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody.